Thank you very much for joining us on the AppSec Days OWASP Developer Summit for 2021. And with me today is Steve. Steve is very keen to talk to you. He's a tech evangelist and an advocate who likes to nurture devs and help them to understand the importance of security. And today, Steve's going to be talking to us about helping developers adopt a security-first approach to development. So take it away, Steve.
Amazing, thank you. And so great to be here. I hope everyone's safe, well, constantly learning, always be learning. But you already know that because you're here today spending your time with us. I just wanted to say how great that intro was from Andrew at the start of these sessions. And in particular, I just want to say a big thank you to not only the amazing OWASP folks that help these great communities learn all the things they learn, share all the knowledge they share, which is one of my favorite things, being able to interact with all these communities, is you're always learning new things. Anyway, I'm coming to you from today, as you may tell from my accent, from Australia, from a little country town called Narromine, which is it's about 7 hours from Sydney, out in the country. On that note, something we do in Australia is pay our acknowledgements and respects to the Indigenous owners on the lands in which we present. And so I'd like to give a heartfelt acknowledgement to the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners here in Narromine. So thank you all for joining us. Now, slight disclaimer, just as I switch to my slides, slight disclaimer. I love, I'm going to say developer jokes, but also tech jokes, because I love opening with these just because, well, it's important that we always keep laughing and keep smiling in times like this. So, and this joke is open source, so please take it with you today. If you take one thing, no, you're going to take many things, I hope, including some working demos. But anyway, we'll get to that. Why did the vulnerability get tied? And you might be like, why would the vulnerability get tied? It's because it ransomware. There you go. I can feel the face palms from here, and they are amazing. On that note, if you, I'll switch back to the chat at the end. If you have any questions, comments, face palms, emojis, I accept them all. But yeah, we'll go through those at the end. But for those that don't know me, hello, I am Developer Steve. I'm one of the senior developer advocates at Sneak. Funny story. So Developer Steve is actually part of my legal name, was slightly unintentional. Well, I mean, I knew I was doing it because I filled the form out, but Cochin is my married name. So actually that photo on the top right is from my wedding. I got married a few years ago, and we combined our last names. So Cooper plus Houchin became Cochin. And while I was getting my name legally changed, I've been a developer advocate for many years now for some really cool companies. And everyone just started calling me Developer Steve because I've spoken at a lot of events and geeked out with so many communities. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can make it my middle name. It turns out you can. So it is actually my legal name. So there you go. But I have been coding for many, many years. So, I mean, it kind of fitted anyway. I've been coding since the age of 8, back when, for those that know it, and I'm totally going to show my age here, but on an Atari 800 XL with the big 5.5-inch discs, those things, coding QBasic, which, well, as the name suggested, it was pretty basic. I've tried doing it since, but like, yeah, you miss libraries and dependencies and, well, all the stuff we take for granted in modern day languages. Which kind of brings me to my first slide, which is, well, as my name suggests, I'm a developer. So I thought this is one of the sessions that we've been doing in helping devs adopt a embrace the shift left mindset of embracing security. So this is kind of 2 talks in one almost, because from the developer side of things, this is understanding why you need to adopt that security mindset. And as a dev, I've got some great examples of that. In fact, as a dev, in what I call my developer origin story, even just going back and rescanning or scanning and looking into the security aspects of stuff that I've used before, like in my digital agency world, like open source platforms, scanning them and understanding why I, as an agency dev, like why I was getting this site back into, well, clean up the server so many times, so many sleepless nights. And then from the security side of things, how we can help developers adopt that shift left mindset from a developer standpoint or from a developer view. So it's been really interesting sort of having a look from both sides of that. So this is kind of an ask me anything session. And again, like put your comments, questions, emojis into the chat, and we can take a look at those at the end, or reach out. Like I'm literally developer Steve at a whole bunch of different social platforms, and I'm always up for geeking out and connecting. So totally reach out. Like I said, I've been coding for many, many years now, and well, especially from the days of QBasic, now we have all these amazing libraries, frameworks, and ecosystems that we can leverage as developers to be able to, well, build out some really cool functions, build out some really cool applications. As a dev, like one of my main goals has always been with that end user in mind, building out applications that help them do all the amazing things that I want them to do with my app, be it ordering shopping, like ordering food, connecting with people, entertaining them. Like my end goal as a developer is helping users adopt stuff that helps them in their everyday lives, no matter what the application like goals are. Like ultimately, as a dev, that's my sole focus. But one thing I've always been mindful of throughout my developer origin story is just like what else is coming in with this platform, what else is coming through this open source thing that I'm integrating, that I'm using in my code. It's something that's always been in the back of my mind. If you think about the holistic view of an application deployment, like it's literally just the tip of the iceberg. Your code is that gateway to the world, gateway to the users, gateway to potential vulnerabilities that it surfaces in your stack. Of course, everything, all these applications, all these libraries, all these dependencies that you pull into your application, it's all built on open source. And something we see that like exponentially growing is just these amazing ecosystems that facilitate that. You think like all the different programming languages that deploy new functionality constantly, there's exponential growth in the functionality inside the libraries that then opens up. And it's no surprise, and I know a lot of the security folks in the room will be going, "Yeah, we know this one." That also starts to surface a whole bunch of new vulnerabilities, not only as the ecosystems grow, but as the attack methods grow, as the infrastructure that all these applications are running on starts to exponentially grow. It does bring with it like all these new vulnerabilities and attack vectors into your stack, literally opening up doorways into your infrastructure, which is scary because having been the dev on the other side, or the DevOps even on the other side of that fence, like you're the one ultimately that gets that person come up at the end of the month going, "Why is this costing so much?" Oh, been there before. Yeah. And that's when you start to dig into the code, going through different logs and finding things that are surfacing inside your stack, things that are running that, well, you don't want them there. You don't want them there at all. Which starts to bring us into the world of like the open source supply chain security, which I'm not going to go too much into. And I know a lot of the security folks have, well, we all see so many stories behind this one dependency or one library that led in this vulnerable dependency. The flow on effects are massive, not only patching that initial library or that initial vulnerability, but also the subsequent fallout of what that led in as well, because that opens up into our stack doorways that lets things in that we don't want there. And that takes a lot, all that stuff takes time to fix, not only on the initial library vulnerability that opens up. An Electron native notify is only but one use case or one example of this. Again, we see so many stories of this occurring literally in the internet wilds all the time. I just wanted to mention that too, like particularly with all these amazing open source communities, is if you are using or leveraging some open source work, please take time to give back. Even just adding some stuff to a README, even just verifying a release candidate for something that patches one of these bugs. Like as open source enthusiasts, we should all be giving back where we can. For new developers, this is a great way to get some hands-on experience and, well, just show what you can do. But ultimately, like our entire industry is built on these communities. So anyway, always good to give back. I know you will, but I had just loved to mention it. One of the ways we do that at Sneak is with this site called Sneak Advisor that lets developers do some due diligence on things that they use, open source libraries, dependencies, and well, open source stuff that they're using, which is really cool because it shows not only sort of the history behind the stuff that they're using, be it vulnerabilities, releases, like community activity, etc., but it helps identify vulnerabilities in the wild. And this is only just one of the ways. The other way is we actually we took on the responsibility of the vulnerability disclosure program for Node.js. And ultimately, this is helping developers, helping apps, helping everyone keep end users safe. Because as devs, that's our sole goal. Like we build these applications for developers. We build these applications for end users to be able to do some amazing stuff. It's one of the responsibilities of that is help keeping their data safe, helping keep them safe. Ultimately, this sort of helps keep the entire ecosystem safe. And interestingly, we're going to be, and it's totally going to work because I've told Murphy's Law to go away, but we're going to be looking at an indirect dependency vulnerability demo today. One that we show, one of the ones that we help show developers why they need to be adopting this security first or code front first mindset. But up to 80% of vulnerabilities discovered are found through indirect dependencies. So as a developer, like I go npm install one particular library, which pulls in like 250, sometimes up to 15 different dependencies for that one library to do the things it needs to do. Inside the code at the code front, I may not be using all that functionality inside that particular library, but it's still going to pull in all those additional dependencies. Of course, scanning at the code front is critical to being able to identify these sort of things in the wild, ideally before they even go into deployment, into production. But you need to be ongoingly scanning them as well, which is something we always re-emphasize with developers because, like, as we know on the security side of things, vulnerabilities are being surfaced all the time, or new attack vectors, new vulnerabilities in the wild. And this may not necessarily be just on the library or dependency itself, but also a combination of the library dependency and the operating environment that it's running on as well. Again, it's about stopping that initial attack vector being surfaced at the very top of your stack, but then ongoingly scanning for that as well, because that is so important. And of course, in the cloud native world, like your app is totally more than your code. And one of the reasons like why I shifted many years ago from development into DevOps is, being able to build your own infrastructure or build your own sandboxes is great. But as a developer, that's the coolest thing because I can control the environment that I'm actually building my applications for itself. And we're seeing a lot of this being adopted now, particularly with that whole digital transformation or digital adoption, particularly with containerization, which from a development and DevOps and, infrastructure point of view as well, it's really cool because I can deploy my application, I can move it around, stacks as I need to. It makes it very easy for me to be able to deploy a portable application that can scale as users adopt it. Again, from the development side of things, this is great because, that's why we build them, right? To adopt many, many users, many hundreds of thousands of millions, etc. But as I basically get that user adoption from the DevOps point of view, like I want to get that scalability and that elasticity with it. And this is testament to, from Docker, for example, 242 billion container downloads, base image downloads to date. And that's from Docker Inc. As you can imagine, though, a lot of these Docker containers are built using open source stuff. Like they're literally built using open source components. So a lot of the times those images also come down with the vulnerabilities baked into the images as well, which is why we need to be making sure that we not only scan those initially, but also ongoingly, but only start with a base image and build up for the stuff we actually need. Or as I like to think about it, with great containerization comes great responsibility. I do love that meme. From a developer point of view, or from a security point of view, it's more. This becomes really, really important because like getting that code nice and clean and stable and using secure components is great. But it's only part of that iceberg journey when you then deploying onto an image that's carrying the vulnerability, or a Docker image that's carrying vulnerabilities with it. So you totally need to be not only scanning once, but ongoingly scanning for these as well. And lastly, the last part of this particular iceberg stack is one of my favorites, which is infrastructure as code. Again, as from a developer point of view, this is one of my favorites because I can deploy stuff very, very quickly using configuration files, super easy. This is actually one of my favorite demos to do. Spoilers. Not going to do that tonight. Maybe if we have time. But yeah, from an from a developer point of view, infrastructure as code is great because I can deploy stuff very, very quickly as part of a pipeline and be able to have security gates in place, or have security gates set, or test gates set as part of that flow, so that code won't get deployed unless I've been able to get the code past those tests. So no more saying, yes, it worked fine on my machine. I have been there on both sides of the fence. Of course, one of the things to watch out for here is cloud vulnerability is one of the misconfiguration is one of the NSA's top vulnerabilities being surfaced inside infrastructure as code, or as part of stacks. Anyway, let's try some demos. Should we try some demos? All right. So what I'm going to do here, and this is one you can totally try at home. In fact, I always recommend everyone go and try this at home. But it does come with a slight asterisk because, and this is just on our GitHub, I can make the links available after, and this is kind of one of my favorite things to point out because, well, there's 57 known vulnerabilities inside this particular demo. And this is for training and educational purposes only. So please try this at home. Please don't take this to production. But I know you all won't. It can run in a multiple of environments, and there's some really cool exploits in this exploits folder that you can try for yourself. It's pretty easy to set up. There's some instructions in there. We're going to be looking at one today, which is one that I've encountered in my developer origin story, which is a cross-site scripting attack using the marked library. So as you can see here, anything below version 0.3.6 is you shouldn't use it. I like to live dangerously. It comes inside the repo. We're going to be using 0.3.5 here today. So this app is a really basic to-do app. The input method here is just using the marked library, which is a markdown library. So I can do a bit of a pun as part of this one and do, this is a, oops, put my caps lock on, bold statement, which of course will make that. I normally do 2 asterisks there. Let me do that again. This is a bold statement. Hey, there we go. That's better. So yeah, it's as part of the user input. It's just doing as part of the user input, the library itself has a variable that you set to say sanitize is true. I mean, that should be on all the time, right? We should totally always be sanitizing our inputs. It's like the first rule of development. Always sanitize input. I think I'll make a sticker up for that. Anyway, it's doing some basic sanitization on here for this particular version of the library. What it's doing is just doing some regex matching to be able to determine different input string types and essentially strip out bad things or things that we don't want as part of the input. The other thing it's doing is just doing some basic matching on top of some regex. So yeah, it's literally trying to identify different character sets. Of course, one thing you can do with with Markdown is you can drop in links. So being able to do stuff like that, which is standard Markdown link, which we know will work. It will pass the sanitization part of that library, and that'll link off to whatever website that it's meant to link to. Part of the OWASP top 10, particularly for XSS, is being able to, one of the attack methods is being able to get around these type of libraries by injecting some bad stuff in as part of user input, and essentially trying to, as an attacker or finding an attack vector, I'm trying to trick that library into allowing me to get some bad stuff in. So doing stuff like that, and I've done this before. I have tried this at home. I've done a bit of pen testing in the past. This is one of the ways I was able to get around a particular input, or one of those, remember those 25 words or less apps that I built so many of them back in the day on particular social platform, just built into an iframe. There was a few of those that I've pen tested before and done something very similar to this, where I was able to inject a JavaScript redirect, and then it wasn't doing any sanitization. So any user that basically loaded that application and saw my 25 words or less entry, he got redirected to whatever website that I had loaded in. So anyway, please sanitize inputs was the moral of that story. Anyway, in theory, this should get sanitized out, which it does. Of course, one of the ways to get around that is to URL encode character sets as part of the input, which is by doing something very similar to what we just did, but there's some URL encoded characters in there to try and trick around that library. That, of course, won't work. The one that will work, though, and this is in that exploit folder that we're looking at in the repo, is by adding in this, which is a JavaScript object type, and potentially that is the way that you would trip up an XSS sanitization attempt, and that actually does work. And prepare yourself for another pun, but when I click that, it actually says this alert box is alerting. And yes, it is. Because as an attacker, like, I could use that so many different ways. You think stealing browser cookies, like redirecting someone to a particular website, there's a lot of ways that an attacker will identify and use that. Anyway, let's have a look at another one. This time using Java. This is one of my other favorite demo types to explain to devs why they need to be checking for this stuff at the code front. This, again, you can try this at home. This runs pretty easily on Heroku, which is where we're running it today. I am going to refresh this so that I can talk to this other page. The one in particular, again, similar to the last one, we're looking at there's a whole bunch of different exploits you can try at home. We're going to be looking at the zip. Try saying that fast 3 times. We're going to be using, this is a file traversal. Now, I've encountered these in the wild. Usually I have been on the receiving end of them, sadly, where I've deployed websites before and somebody's been able to get through my infrastructure and deploy some stuff onto the server that we did not want there, and then you get that bill. So totally is something that you want to be picking up before you get into production, or even something to identify if you have got something in production, you want to find it before they do. Oh, and I have got an application error. Isn't that off to a good start? Anyway, I've now woken up my Heroku instance, so it might be a little bit happier. Fingers crossed. Oh, come on. Anyway, the zipslip.zip vulnerability, what it does, it uses the zip util library inside Java. And what we're going to be doing is hijacking. We're going to be, no, there's probably a better word, but it's really lady. We're going to be messing around with the native to ASCII functionality inside this application. Oh, there we go. We're back to normal now, so I should be able to sign in with my credentials I prepared earlier. Hey, that should log in. It looks happy. It hasn't gone to an error yet. We're going to be file traversal. Yeah, I know it's not safe. It's the demo one. We're going to be doing the file traversal to basically replace that particular function, and which you could do some nasty stuff with. So we're going to, this is another basic to-do app. I can create a basic, I'm just going to do a testing. We can do a basic to-do entry fairly easily, and whatever I put in there, see, it'll appear with whatever I've entered. So the zip file we're about to upload, because as a user, I can, as part of this app, I can upload files to it. So the zip file that comes inside that exploit folder, what that does is, you can see there, hopefully you all can see that. I've zoomed it in a bit more. There we go. It does a file traversal. There's 2 files in the zip. It does a file traversal to replace that particular function in the JDK but it's also uploading good.txt. Which one of those do you think is not good? No, I'm joking. You can tell. So basically what this does is it utilizes the vulnerability identified in that particular library and then uploads the zip, decompresses it, and good.txt gets created. And as you can imagine, the file traversal kicks in and hijacks it. So let's have a look at that particular. Of course, I wasn't in the right spot. Let me navigate to zipslip.zip. There we go there. So I'm going to upload that now, which, as predicted, created the good.txt file, and everything looks fairly normal. User, of course, isn't going to know that something has changed. Yeah, let's get the Doge one. So I'm going to add another entry now in because there's something important that I had to remember to do. And there you go there. See, it's just hijacked the input for ASCII to text. And now anytime I enter stuff in, of course, yeah, it's just going to keep doing that. Of course, that was only one way that that particular vulnerability could be utilized. And I'm sure the security professionals in the room would know many stories, many horror stories on how this can be utilized to do some nasty stuff and have an unwanted party on your server. Just going to show you one more. And as I was saying at the start, like as a developer, I have gone back and looked at open source things that I'd used in the past and not realized what state they were or what was hiding in them, what was lurking. So one that I found really surprising recently is an NPM project called Ghost. Now, a few years ago, there was a lot of people moving from WordPress, particularly in the JavaScript communities, to the WordPress equivalent called Ghost because the security side of things. But I've got that sitting in a folder here. So this is the latest version of the NPM Ghost. If I do a command line scan, I was legitimately surprised at this. And this is one of the ways I've actually done a few talks at JavaScript groups lately. Yeah, you can see there's some. Well, it's got a lot in it. I've actually done some talks at some JavaScript communities recently, and sort of highlighted this. And it's got a bit of attention. The thing here is it's actually using, and we can have a look at one of the vulnerabilities in question. While a lot of these open source platforms may not necessarily directly surface these vulnerabilities, these are lurking inside that platform and can be utilized any number of ways to do some nasty things. Everything from server-side request forgery right through to access restriction bypass, so you can log in. Insufficient input validation. I mean that's a fairly low one, but there is some nasty stuff hiding in here. If you are using some open source stuff and you're unaware of what is in there, please take a moment to scan it. Also, again, contribute back. Like if you found something in one of these things, reach out to the community, let them know, or see if they are already aware of it and working on it. So contribute back. But you will do because you're all awesome. Let me switch back to my slides. Hey, there we go. But we've missed something really important in all this. And this is probably the most, for a developer, this is like sacred ground because this is something that shocked me recently as well. So if you think that holistic iceberg view, there's those 4 different parts of the iceberg of, an app basically in the wild, there's the development environment, because a lot of the times as developers, we're building this stuff or we're utilizing a lot of the stuff we've just been looking at inside our development environments, which now use a lot of the open source libraries and dependencies and projects and community work that we've just been looking at. And so this is something that's starting to become more prominent. Is there's libraries like LaTeX Workshop, Open in Default Browser, Instant Markdown, and one of my favorites, and this is actually a VS Code extension called Rainbow Fart, which are built on open source libraries, dependencies that are starting to surface vulnerabilities inside development environments. We've actually got a bit of a write-up on this, and it's something we're starting to demo in communities at the moment. This actually scared me so much so to the point where I was getting ready to install some of the extensions that I was just talking about in my own development environment. And I thought, I probably don't want to do this. So I've got a OS X running inside a VM just so I can keep it isolated from my own VS Code development environment. But the most scary thing we found is some of these vulnerabilities actually give attackers access to your OS X password file. Yeah, this one actually scares me a little bit. So yeah, please be aware from the developers in the room. Please be aware of what you're installing and what you're using in your development environment. Homebrew, for those using it, is no exception to this as well. There's some stuff starting to surface inside that as well. So please be aware of what you're installing. Which is actually one of my takeaway points. So spoilers. So just some takeaways as we wrap up. Always be scanning source code, containers, infrastructure. You're all going to do it now. I know you are. If you're not already doing it, you're totally going to be doing it. And as I was just saying, please be aware of what you install in your development environment. Like, make sure you keep that nice and clean and vulnerability free, because you totally need to be doing it. There's some nasty stuff in there. There's actually a really good YouTube we've done of this one as well on the Snyk YouTube, where actually we that's actually where we figured out that the password file can be exposed. So it is actually really funny to watch. So please check that out. Anyway, I just wanted to wrap up and saying, please use your tech superpowers for good and be excellent to each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was great fun. And speaking of Snyk, just quick thanks to Snyk, who are our platinum sponsors. So they are helping to make this happen today, and we want to thank them very much for that. In the meantime, if there are questions for Steve, please go hit him up on Twitter or on the YouTube channel right now. And yeah, thanks so much, Steve. I'm going to kick off the next talk. There were some questions in YouTube, so just please take a look at them. I'm sure people happy to be engaging with you on that platform too. Cool.
Awesome. I'll jump over. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.